Welcome back, everyone, to the Real Talk Podcast. I am your host, as always, Liam Crowley, and on today's show, we have a special episode dedicated completely to the release of Thor Ragnarok. Myself, Mike, and a couple of friends went to go see it on its opening night on Friday, and we have some thoughts about the movie. Joining me, as I just mentioned, Mike Gillis. Mike, what's going on?
What's up, guys? Can't wait to start talking about this movie. I have some goods and bads, but I think mostly goods.
That's good to hear. All right, so we are going to divide this review by a non-spoilers and spoilers section. Obviously, like I said, this episode is all Thor Ragnarok, so we don't have any movie news. We will have a regular episode with movie news this week, as usual, on Wednesday. And that will also have, of course, Attack of the Clones review attached following our weekly Star Wars reviews. But this was a movie we had to go out and see. We couldn't push it to after Star Wars because, first off, I don't even know if it would still be in theaters after the release of The Last Jedi. And also, whenever a Marvel movie comes out, you kind of always have to get on the hype train right away. Because you wait too long and you let it die down, then, it's not as special. And in today's modern world, avoiding spoilers is very difficult. So I'm glad. Yeah, same. I'm glad we got to see it when we did. And so I'd say let's get right into it. For our non-spoiler section, we're going to focus basically on everything based on what you saw in the trailers. We're not going to talk about anything that wasn't explicitly stated in the trailers. We'll save that for the spoiler section. We are not going to give our score out of 10 until the very end of the review. So if you want to fast forward after the non-spoiler section, towards the end, I would say probably with about 5 minutes left of the podcast, we'll give our general scores. But my primary advice is to listen to our non-spoiler section, go see the movie, come back for our spoiler section, get the podcast in full. All right, so without further ado, let's just get right into it. With our non-spoiler section, we're going to start out with our favorite scenes from the movie. So what is your favorite scene that we saw in the trailer? We'll leave it at that because we can't go too spoilery. I'm just going to go right off the bat and go with the Thor-Hulk fight scene at the Contest of Champions, as the Grandmaster refers to it. I thought that scene was magnificent in its execution, and from what we saw in the trailers, it looked really cool, and what we saw in the movie, there's some nice subtle nods to, I won't say to what, but it's got great, I don't know if I'd call it an Easter egg, but it's got nice nods to past Marvel moments, and I just really enjoyed the scene as a whole. So with that being said, Mike, what's your favorite scene that we know of from the trailers?
Well, my favorite scene that we know from the trailers, I guess, would also be the Hulk fight.
That's fair, yeah.
Because that was built up so much.
Sure.
My real favorite scene isn't that.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the trailer, so we'll talk about that when we get to spoilers.
Yeah, that's fair.
It is a spoiler. But no, the Hulk fight, it was built up properly in the trailers and it pays off well in the movie.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so with that being said, because we're kind of focusing on our positives right now, we're just going to get into our non-spoiler positives of the movie. Primarily for me, I would say a big positive is the relationship between Thor and Loki. I feel like anytime Hiddleston and Hemsworth are on screen together in these Marvel movies, they always seem to blow it out of the water. They have great chemistry, as we've seen since the original Thor movie, obviously in the Avengers as well, Thor the Dark World, and now with Thor Ragnarok. Their chemistry carries through, and this movie took a bit of a different approach because in the original Thor, obviously they were brothers, but they were butting heads. The Avengers, they were basically enemies. In the Dark World, they were, more frenemies. Like, I don't want to trust you, but I need to. This was the first time we got to see Thor and Loki really be like buddy and be cracking jokes at each other, because I can't say when at the beginning, but they joke around a lot as compared to in the Dark World where they are, I wouldn't say friends, but more so comrades. And obviously when Loki, spoilers for Thor the Dark World, but when he fake dies in the movie, we see a heart-to-heart moment with Thor, but it's more of an emotional scene, not really a buddy scene. So that's what I would say is that the chemistry between Hemsworth and Hiddleston is on point as always, but they get to take a new approach with the relationship between Thor and Loki, the brothers of Asgard.
Yeah, I thought that relationship works well in all the movies, but especially in this movie, they felt more like brothers again. Like, in the first scenes of Thor when they're fighting together, that's like the peak of Thor-Loki relationship there, and I think they were able to get back to that in this movie.
Absolutely. Further positives from this movie, I would say mostly Cate Blanchett as Hela. I liked her performance.
Yeah, she was really good.
I would say she did the best she could do with what she was given, but to be honest, Hela's story arc, I don't think it really worked for me, to be honest, because while I get the backstory of her motives and such, just the execution, she was kind of built up to be one of the best Marvel villains, and honestly, I kind of find her to be pretty forgettable after this movie. I understand the magnitude of what she was able to accomplish, but at the same time, it kind of just felt like another, oh, here's a big bad. How are we ever going to defeat her? She's basically unstoppable. We all unite, and then, we'll fight her together or something like that. It's tough doing the non-spoilers because you have to be very vague.
You got to be careful what you say.
Yeah. And so I'd say Cate Blanchett as Hela, with what she was given, she did very good considering her limitations as a character.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Every Marvel villain is always kind of weak. I still think Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming was the best we've seen so far. Him and Loki kind of tie because they're not villains all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's how you should do a villain, because I don't think she has any qualities that make her not a villain.
That's fair.
She's very villain. I am villain. I'm bad.
Yeah.
That's kind of her whole thing. And I think that weakens her, but as an actress, she did a good job with what she had. And I think her performance was one of the better performances for a villain, but not the best villain in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, very fair. So, with that being said, is there any other positives you want to touch on before we get into our non-spoiler negatives?
I think the rest of the positives I want to talk about in the spoiler section.
All right.
Because I think most of the stuff I want to say is spoilers.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so moving on to our negatives of our non-spoiler section. I'll get more into it in spoilers because there are specific plot details that really did not work for me in this movie, but I can't get into them here. I would say I'm kind of 50-50 on the humor in this movie because as we've seen from the trailers, the TV spots, and even just looking at the title of the movie, when you see the title logo of the movie compared to what it was when it was announced at not D23, but it was a Marvel special that they held in New York.
Was it Comic-Con?
It wasn't Comic when Marvel announced their Phase 3 movies. Okay. And they gave them all logos. So it's not the same logo as it was before. The first logo I remember when it was first announced, this is way back in 2014, so almost 3 years ago now, and the logo was very black and red, and it really, it signified that this was going to be like an apocalyptic movie, and then they changed it because of the tone change they were going for, and they made it more 80s, like, whoa, like bright yellow and blue, and just from that you can kind of see what this movie's going to be. Ragnarok translates to the end of all things, but when you look at it, you would think it's some sort of dance move, honestly, from the trailer and the title sequence. That's why the humor's kind of 50-50 for me, because there are hilarious moments in this movie. I will say, we don't see him in the trailers, but be on the lookout for a character named Korg. Korg with a C. Korg with a C, okay. Yeah. But he steals the movie.
Yeah, he does.
Absolutely. All his scenes are amazing. There is one that I'm not crazy about, but I'll get into that in spoilers, obviously. but the humor in this movie works when it's appropriate.
For humor to be there.
Right, but there are times when jokes are being made that, first off, I did not find funny, and furthermore, like, it's not a time where I think a joke should be made. Yeah, like I keep reiterating this, but it's very tough to be vague in the non-spoiler section. But yeah, that's my main negative with the movie is the humor. Because like I said, even though it is 50-50, I think where the humor didn't work really brought down what the movie should have been going for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. I think my main negative, and it's not a spoiler, I guess the beginning of the movie was a little slow for me, and I got worried. I'm like, oh, what's happening? This isn't interesting. Am I watching Thor? Like, it was kind of slow. It picks up. It does pick up, and that's I think my main gripe is the beginning's a little slow. But I guess some of the jokes don't land, as you said, but I thought most of the jokes are pretty funny.
That's fair. With that being said, do we have anything else we want to go into in the non-spoiler section?
I think most of what we're going to talk about is going to be spoiler, so I think we should just move along.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so like I said, this review is basically going to be mainly spoilers, and so this is a fair spoiler warning right now. If you have not seen Thor Ragnarok, I would recommend going to see it, then coming back to listen to our thoughts, because we are going to be talking about this movie as if you have seen the movie with us. So we're going to be referencing specific scenes that, obviously, if you haven't seen it, not only will they not make sense, but then the scene's reveal is ruined for you when you eventually do go see this movie. Getting right off the bat, I'm just going to touch on what you just said about pacing. Personally, I felt the opposite in the beginning. I felt the beginning was almost too fast-paced. It's weird because I don't think I've ever had a situation like this where I've had, like, feeling different about the pacing of a movie, because usually the pacing isn't very subjective. But to be specific now, we start off and he's captured by Surtur, and you know right off the bat that this is going to be a joking movie when the first line of the movie is, you know, basically the meme that we go seeing around that goes, you're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
That's what threw me off. It kind of was like,
yeah.
This?
And so we get that, and then personally, I felt it was just ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom with he escapes Surtur and he goes back to Asgard, and we reveal that Odin is really Loki, and then they go to Earth, and then they meet Doctor Strange, and then Doctor Strange sends them off, and then and then they go and meet Odin, and then Odin sits with them on a rock and he talks, and then he dies, and then Hela shows up, and then Hela is like, hey, I'm the bad guy, and then they continue on, and then I felt the movie got its proper pacing when whatever the trash planet's name was, I forget the name of the what?
No, I was saying I agree with you on how the pacing was fast. I was just saying the first opening scene when he was talking to Surtur, I thought had a weird placement in the movie.
That's fair, because
I felt like the scene was unnecessary. They could have shortened that scene.
I agree, because also Surtur, I didn't like his portrayal.
It was Mr. Krabs, you know, the guy who
really?
Mr. Krabs, Clancy Brown.
Oh my god. All right. I'm going to start off, well, I kind of already started off the spoiler section, but I just want to preface where my complaints are going to be coming from, because I'm going to be honest right now, as overall, I did not like this movie. Personally. It's weird because every TV spot you see nowadays is go out and see the best reviewed Marvel movie of all time, and like this is like groundbreaking for Marvel. And I'm just going to preface where my complaints are, so at least hopefully they can be understood. As I referenced in the non-spoilers, when this movie was announced at the Phase 3 announcement special, they went through every movie. They went through Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Infinity Wars, Captain America Serpent Society,